that, Susie? Okay. All right, Sherry, yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks everybody for joining the call. My name's Sherry Flemming, and I've lived in Williams County for a little over 40 years. I guess just some background on our citizen group. We're the Williams County Alliance. We formed back in 2006. This area is predominantly conventional agriculture, corn, soybeans, wheat, but in the late 1990s, you began to see an influx of factory farms coming into Northwest Ohio, and that triggered the formation of the group we have. And I think I will stop right there and let you move into the video.
Okay. All right. Let me go ahead and try to share my screen. We'll play the video and then we'll go from there. So, yeah. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Let's see if I do full screen, will it still show up? Is it visible first for the full screen? Okay, so I'll go ahead and click play. Sorry, good quick ad here.
Wix gives you the power of AI to build the website you need.
Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen here and yeah, so Sherry, and then also you can let me know when you want to share the PowerPoint that you have here.
Okay, Bill, I think really it would be helpful if we just start with a PowerPoint so
Start
that
with it?
people
Okay.
can see,
Okay.
have a better grasp of the aquifer.
Sure. Okay. All right. And let me kind of open it up a bit there. Okay, there we are.
Okay, thank you. As you can see, Williams County, we're in the far northwest corner of Ohio. Michigan is to our north, and Indiana is over to our west. And even though we call it the Michindoh aquifer, it is actually what's called an aquifer system. It was formed from when the glaciers started to recede, and as the ice melted, there was sand, gravel, boulders, and whatever. And so what it created was a series of lenses throughout this area. And the aquifer on average is capable of pumping between 100 to 500 gallons per minute. But because it is not this uniform system, you may have very abundant water in one area and may not find it in others. But because it's all hydraulically connected, what happens in one part of the aquifer, and it may take more time to happen than in other areas, it can impact other sections of the aquifer. And something I guess that we've learned much more about water than we ever thought we would. But there also exists this relationship between the surface waters and the aquifer, where the rivers and the lakes, they will feed upon each other. In times of drought, the rivers and lakes are typically called recharge areas, and they will pull water out of the aquifer. And then when you have times of abundant water, you will see the water move back into the aquifer from the rivers and the lakes. So you have this really complex relationship within that ecosystem. I guess if you want to go to the next slide now, Bill.
Okay, sure. Okay, there we are.
Because even though we sat almost an hour west of Toledo, we have two major rivers within our area, the Tiffin and the St. Joe. And those are tributaries of the Maumee River. and then the Maumee River ends up emptying into Lake Erie, so that you see this relationship between the different waters, whether it's groundwater or surface waters, how what in our area, which is an hour west of Toledo, can end up impacting Lake Erie. And this happens to be the 10-year anniversary of Toledo losing their water from the toxic algae bloom. And because of the large number of, most people call them factory farms, concentrated animal feeding operations located typically in Northwest Ohio, that the contamination flows along the surface waters and ends up impacting Lake Erie. So you just see how this rural little county can have an impact not only on Lake Erie, but it can end up extending into the whole Great Lakes ecosystem. I'm going to have to jump back. Our citizen group was predominantly involved with the factory farm issue. But in 2018, we became totally blindsided. It appeared in our local newspaper that there was a plan to tap into the Michindoh aquifer to sell water to communities surrounding Toledo. These communities had been getting their water from the Toledo, but part of it stemmed from the algae bloom that occurred in 2014 and some conflicts over pricing with Toledo, that they were looking for an alternative water supply. And this was just something that caught people over the entire aquifer system totally off guard. And the aquifer supplies not only our county, Williams County, but it extends into Michigan and Indiana. And you're looking at almost 400,000 people that this is our main source of water. So if you would move on to the next slide, Bill, please.
Sure, sure.
So the actions in 2018 really kind of put things into play that didn't result in what I call the aquifer community wanted to see happen. When this proposal came out in 2018 to try and market water to Toledo, in 2019, we worked with CELDF to do a county home rule charter, which included language within it that would exist, that would recognize the right of the Michindoh aquifer to exist, flourish, and evolve. And we gathered more than enough signatures to have it placed on the ballot, but it was kept off of the ballot, thanks to our Secretary of State. But 2019 was also the time that, as I mentioned in the video, that Toledo passed the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, but unfortunately, shortly after that, it was overturned. And then our state legislators, both our state representative and state senator, were responsible for implementing legislation that put sole oversight over water withdrawals under the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. And it basically designated water as another resource, the same as other natural and mineral resources. So let me catch up here. In 2019, what also happened was our state representative Hoops also inserted language into the biennial budget bill, which prevented people from acting on behalf of nature within the legal system. So it just seemed like between Toledo and what happened in our county with us doing the county charter, that there was a backlash from the state over taking control of the water and preventing people from having any say in what was going to happen. And as we all know, in 2020, when COVID hit, things were pretty quiet. Even though the plan in 2018 to market water never materialized, we believe that there would be another attempt to commodify the water from the aquifer. And in the beginning of, gosh, it was probably the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021, people noticed that there were wells being drilled in the northern part of our county, and it was being done by an individual who had come up with a plan to market water to the Toledo area communities. And then that summer, it came out that AquaBounty, which is this land-based aquaculture corporation, had plans to build this huge 11-acre indoor facility in Williams County. And I mean, the fact they're planning on raising genetically engineered salmon. And genetically engineered salmon is the first animal approved by the FDA for human consumption. And you begin to see where the connection, because the facility would need over 5 million gallons of water a day. And even though they claim, and they do, recirculate the water to filter it, to clean it, they have to introduce enough clean water into the system that they're dumping almost 5 million gallons of water a day. And in that discharge into the St. Joe River, which is a tributary of the Maumee, which empties into Lake Erie, there is the risk of the genetically engineered salmon escaping and ending up into the Lake Erie ecosystem. The ODNR, when AquaBounty applied for the water withdrawal, there was a comment period, which, if most people are familiar with the regulatory process, there were over 1,200 comments submitted by people in opposition to the withdrawal permit. And the amazing thing was that so many of the overwhelming majority of these comments were handwritten comments, and people really, I guess the thing with the factory farm issue, we'd always had concern about contamination of the water, but this struck people in a way that I think that I've never seen before, because their comments talked about how would this impact. They wanted water for future generations. They felt that it was so wasteful that if you were going to allow something like this to happen, that you should have to recycle the water, that you shouldn't be allowed to dump this amount of water every day into the river. And that people recognize that water is essential for all life. But as we all know, if you aren't able to find deficiencies in the requirements of the regulatory process, it doesn't matter what the people want or how much they want to protect the water. So in 2022, AquaBounty received the first ODNR water withdrawal and consumptive use permit for 5.25 million gallons today. And right now, there's been, I guess, a legal battle going on, because the well field that they plan on using for this facility is about, it's probably about a half a mile outside the village limits. It's a 16-inch well. It can pump 1,600 gallons a minute of water. And there is a legal battle going over running a water line from the industrial park inside this village where the facility would be and where the well field would be. Fortunately, our county commissioners have come out against these lines being run in the county right of way. So right now, we're getting close to hearing oral arguments in the 6th District Court of Appeals. And at this point, AquaBounty is in terrible financial situation. financially, I don't know how they can build what they want to build. But what concerns me is that the state sometimes can come up with money from somewhere to prop up these industries. But when the comments were submitted on the water withdrawal permit, if you would go to the next slide, Bill.
Okay.
This was really, I guess, so wonderful to see, and I guess it's interesting. The Pokagon Band of the Potawatomi are located in southern Michigan, and they've been watching this, and they submitted these comments. This isn't the entire comments that they submitted. They also have a DNR, but I think it reflects what was stated in the video, that there's such a great respect for water. It's considered sacred and is such essential element for life. And you just see the stark contrast between the fact that in our system, it appears that water is valued more as a commodity than something essential for life. And so from there, I hope we can have a great discussion from this point. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, Sherry. And yeah, so please, if you either want to type your question in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand, and there's a way to do that in reactions there, then you could ask your question. Or if you'd rather just type it, we can read it there. Please go ahead, and anybody who wants to speak or has a question of any kind. Well, while we're waiting, I have a question. Sherry, your group, what kinds of actions has your group? Because we talked about what people can do. What has your group, the Michindoh Water Warriors? Is that what you call yourselves? Or
No, we're the Williams County Alliance.
William County Alliance? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in 2018, we did the county charter effort, but
Right. Is it the same group with this? They're the same group organizing against this AquaBounty project too?
Right. And I mean, existing law doesn't allow us really, we can't say no. We have tried, we've gone to Toledo, we've been to Fort Wayne, to try and make people understand not only, I mean, water is such a critical thing for us, but the impact of the genetically engineered salmon, if it escapes upon the ecosystem, could be devastating.
Yeah. There's a comment in there that Tish put in about that this GMO salmon is a very voracious eater, and what it might be to do to the ecosystem, especially if it got into the Great Lakes. Perhaps you want to say something about that.
The salmon is across along the Atlantic salmon, and so it was genetically, they added some DNA from Chinook salmon plus a fish called an eel pout, which is actually a fish, but it looks like an eel, and it grows all year long in cold water. And so these salmon that they've created grow about I believe it's about 3 times as fast as a normal salmon. So, yeah, and I mean, AquaBounty will state that the fish are sterile, but that's 100% sterility isn't possible. And when you look at the fact there will be millions of fish, and you take even 1% of that, plus you have the eggs, which it sounds like, it wouldn't surprise me. Their hatchery right now is up in Prince Edward Island in Canada, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were to shift some of the egg production, if this becomes a reality, down to this facility.
Charlotte asked if the amount of well withdrawal that you mentioned is about half of what the state permits. So might they be looking for even more wells?
Right now, the 5.25 million, they had applied twice. The first time they applied for, it was around 3 million gallons a day. And it was a well field to the east of the village of Pioneer where this facility would be located. And then there were some issues with the lake, a smaller lake there, that it was going to be impacted. So then they drilled north of the village and they came upon this fantastic. And that's where it's interesting about the aquifer system, because sometimes you can just move a short distance and find an extremely abundant amount of water. In other places, not so much. But this well right now that they're permitted for is 5.25 million. And that's what they need right now to operate. But it would surprise me. I mean, the cone of depression of people, it's when they start pumping, it creates almost like, it looks like a funnel. Like if you could look at underground of where it's pulling water. And so it would go 10 miles into the state of Michigan. It would impact people's wells. And when they've done pump tests where they'll pump maybe for 3 days in a row, it's heavy to see what the well will produce. It's changed the quality of people's water because it's agitated the aquifer so much.
Okay. Before I go to, I see there's a hand raised. Couple questions. Tish asked, which are, I think, quite interesting. Would consumers know that the salmon they are purchasing, if this plant happens, are GMO salmon? And she says, doesn't Canada produce the eggs, but doesn't allow GMO salmon in Canada? She said she thought she remembered reading something about that, but not 100% sure. So I don't know if you know the answer to those two things.
Yeah, AquaBounty has really been fighting the labeling, and it would be called, and I don't think it's just AquaBounty, but instead of calling it genetically engineered, they want to call it bioengineered, but then they don't even want to put the wording on the package. They would use that QR code or a barcode you would have to scan to see if it is genetically engineered. And they are, I believe, they're selling salmon in Canada now. Some of the groups we've worked with, yeah, it's on the market in Canada.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
Bob Grayson, go ahead. He has a question, hand raised.
The 5 million gallons a day sounds pretty familiar to us here in Columbus. When you said that number, all I could think of is what the Columbus City Water Department officials said to us about the need for water in Columbus the next 5 years, and the figure was 5 million gallons.
You
Oh,
mean for Intel, yeah.
Well, Intel and an increasing population. And all those of us who were at the meeting sat there and said, well, where are they going to find 5 million gallons? So
Yeah.
I think what your story tells us is we better watch out for our aquifers and God knows what else, where they're going to find that amount of water. So I think that information is translatable down here to Columbus.
Yeah, let me just
definitely.
piggyback on what Bob said there, that Heidi asked, I know she's here in Columbus, that she said that she's curious if similar concerns over water have been raised about Intel. So our local group here, Columbus, we met with the water department and they told us that Columbus is supposed to supply that 5 million gallons a day. And we raised concerns about the waste and all that. I won't get into that because we're talking about your issue, but yes. And it looks like in the future, they may need even more than that. And they're also looking at aquifers around Granville and Raccoon Creek and so forth. So this is a big concern, is not only the water withdrawal, but the waste. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Sherry, did you have something that you wanted to say about that?
Forget what I was going to say.
Sorry about that.
That's
All right,
okay.
maybe we'll come back to you. Let's see. I see another question in the meanwhile, and maybe over. Okay, Greg asked, do you know what the sustainable yield of the aquifer is? I think you mentioned it. Is it much more than the 5 million gallons a day or not?
Well, in 2019, one of the other things that came out was that our state legislators, they budgeted money to have the USGS do a study of the Michindoh aquifer. And the difficult part, we actually have met with some of the personnel with USGS, but when they do modeling, even the consultants that did the modeling for AquaBounty said that modeling is not an exact science. And so when you look at the complexity of an aquifer system, I mean, there's just so many variables that I don't see. I mean, I'm sure they really don't have that answer right now. ODNR used a study from 1986, I think, that said 200 million gallons of water are coming into Williams County, I believe, almost every day. I can't, but the thing is, you can see the water moves from the northeast to the southwest, kind of across the aquifer. But yeah, they really haven't put a number on it, and I don't know that they realistically can.
Isn't the other problem is that why should they be deciding and be given it, because the people there, it's your water source. Shouldn't you have the right to decide whether you want to let them use it or not? It seems to me.
Yeah, well, it's been interesting though. I mean, I know at first we said protect our water, but it really isn't our water. And that's where I guess when you get into looking at ecosystems and all the entities that depend upon the water, that if you don't begin to take a more holistic view, I mean, people were looking at endangered species to see, you know, if the water withdrawal would impact them, but what about all the other creatures within the ecosystem and the balance that exists in nature? Who's to say what's important and what isn't?
Greg has his hand up there. So Greg, go ahead, your question.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, Sherry, I think basically at the sustainable yield, I was talking about the term carrying capacity. And I work with an organization called Economic Democracy Advocates. And one of the things we've done is some carrying capacity studies. We did one down in Memphis about 1.5 years ago. The Memphis sand aquifer is one of the biggest sand aquifers. I think it's the biggest sand aquifer in the country, and it's all of Memphis's water, public water. And they're real worried about it because Ford's coming down with a EV battery plant, and they're moving a coal ash facility out just outside of the aquifer. A lot of these problems. We did a carrying capacity study. We got our formulas down pretty well for at least for underground. The data seems to be there for underground studies for groundwater. Some surface water is a little more difficult, but I think we can do that too. But I think a carrying capacity is probably something. Carrying capacity study on the water, the regional water, is something that could probably help to define the sustainable yield. When we did it down in Memphis, it was for a group called Protect Our Aquifer, and for about the last decade, a group out of the University of Memphis, they're called CSAR, I can't remember what it stands for, but they've been toting that there's over 53 trillion gallons of water available in the aquifer. There's all these corporations have been coming into Memphis with our study that they actually commissioned us to do this study, and we came up with that there's really only about 25% of that that's actually accessible in the aquifer. And that's when they wouldn't let us use the study. It became a political thing. But a carrying capacity study could be something that could help a lot about.
Greg, can you define carrying capacity? Somebody had a question about that.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Carrying capacity just means the availability. In other words, what we do is we take a population. One way to do it, you can do it with food too. You can take the population, you can take it per person, how many calories a person needs in their body, so how much food they need. And you can actually calculate it that way, then go over the arable land, and all the data is there for that. But with water, you kind of do it like that, you determine how much water each person in the average needs in the area, in the region. Then you go into the businesses and the corporations, the industries, how much water they need. You have to kind of account for it all. And then the carrying capacity is the amount of water available versus the amount of water needed. And,
But-
and
But how, I mean, it sounds good, but I don't understand how, because I mean, the weather changes and it's so based on rainfall and depending on the recharge, how quickly it gets in. And I mean, in our area, we're getting more and more center pivots put in, the center pivot irrigation. And I mean, they are running those things like crazy, 24/7. And I just, I do believe that in Angola, Indiana, and I don't know if Susan's on the call, Susan Catterall, but I believe they came up at least with a certain area of what they felt was available water. And I don't remember what all came out of that, but I don't know what type of aquifer that is where you're talking about, but like the aquifer that we're setting on is so complex. I mean, like you might drop a well and not get hardly any water and go someplace else and get over 1,000 gallons a minute. And it's connected hydraulically, and depending on what the geology is of the water moving through that complex, I don't know how you can safely say, give a number.
it wasn't totally not completely accurate, but
Right.
it gives a good perspective on it. And with the data that's available, there's actually like 4 or 5 layers to go deep down with this aquifer. We defined them all, and then we define which ones the most of the water comes from. And like you say, the recharge areas, there are certain recharge areas in the region that it gets water from. So all that stuff was taken into consideration. But so it was a good study, but that's probably a lot of problems like you're talking about. It's carrying capacity studies. Hopefully they'll be coming up more and more. People will start focusing on that. It's kind of a new word.
Okay. Tish has her hand up too.
Yeah, I just really quick wanted to add to that. Me and Sherry went to, and Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, because I'm not a scientist. I don't pretend to be. But at that conference, water conference we went to in Michigan, and it was interesting because, like she said, the aquifer covers 3 states. And Michigan and Indiana sent their state geologists there, which was, but not Ohio. Oh, they were invited, but they didn't show up. But it was interesting listening to them, because what you're saying, Greg, couple of things. I mean, one, that this is formed by a glacier. And so to Sherry's point, that's what these geologists from the state were like saying, it's almost, it's really impossible to do a model because of that. It's not just like it's a big, hole crater underground and it's pretty much the same depth all the way. It changes everywhere, and no one's been able, they can't take a picture underground of the whole thing. It's too big. But besides that, I mean, I'm just laughing because I'm listening about Intel and AquaBounty, and from all the cases we've had in that, it's like, why do we even believe them? I mean, I remember from the fracking and in Youngstown, it's comical, right? Like they say they're going to withdraw this much. We need this many gallons, but who monitors how many gallons they actually take? Yeah, you're allowed to take 3 million gallons a day, let's say the permit says, but then who's watching that? Nobody. They'll take 10 million if they can. So yeah, all this is just hypotheticals, and this is what we do over and over again, but they control it. And so honestly, I'm sorry, but I don't believe whatever they say they're gonna, do.
Well, the other problem I think is that they not only take water, but then they create waste with it, and oftentimes that waste is totally removed from our water cycle. So fracking, just one example where it's totally, we can't use it again. It's just too polluted, radioactive, and so forth. But yeah, I want to just make one comment, and then I think that there's a couple others here, and if anybody else has a question. I know, Sherry, you had that article also about nature needing a different pronoun and about our relationship to nature. and about not calling it an it. And that makes me, something that really struck me at this conference that you and I went to that was up in Cleveland about the truth, reckoning, and right relationship, as I think it was Sundance, a American Indian, head of the Cleveland American Indian movement, said people shouldn't see water as a resource, but the source. And I thought, wow, that was powerful words. I like that. Yeah. Let's see. So what else is in the chat here? There's a couple, there's a article, America is using up its groundwater like there's no tomorrow. Yeah, that was in the New York Times not long ago. Let's see. There is Susie, yeah, has put in I think another article there, a link. And let's see what else is there. Let's see. Heidi said, did folks recently see the documentary The Grab? These stories are straight up the alley of the film's thesis, corporate state grab of most essential resources. Yeah, we know that's what they do. And Sarah Koya said they truck all the polluted water down here and inject it into under our soil. Well, that's another thing they do with it. Yeah. Any comments there before I see Greg's got his hand up again?
Sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, you mentioned, was it Cape Town, South Africa? Parts of it were running out of water. And we're running into this in a city in this country, in Texas. It's a bedroom community of Austin called Georgetown. And I think it's on the north side of Austin. It's one of the fastest growing communities in the country. You know, everything's coming in there. It's just exploding. And they now realize they will be out of water in the next 5 years. They know now that they are actually going to be out of water in the next 5 years, that they've kind of been able to somehow measure that. So I just wanted to point that out, that that's happening.
Yeah. Well, I know we're getting, go ahead, Sherry. I was going to say that I know that we're getting close, so I wanted you to have the last few minutes to say something, and then I'll close.
Well, I guess it was just kind of along what Greg was saying. I guess AquaBounty hired consultants to do the model. And in Michigan, when they do modeling, they require the industry to turn over their documentation on how they came up with their figures. In Ohio, they aren't required to do that. So, I mean, it's just like Tish, I think Tish made the comment, the model is no better than the accuracy of the information that's put in. And so we're expected to rely on AquaBounty that wants this water to accept their figures, I guess. But yeah. I mean, it's been an interesting journey that, I'm not sure where it's going to end, because even if AquaBounty doesn't materialize, the person that is driving these type of projects fully believes, he views water as no differently as if I'm making car parts and selling them. He said it publicly, and if this fails, he will look for another project. And I mean, there was a huge outcry in our community, and it wasn't only the people, it was the municipalities, more so with selling water to the Toledo area communities. But the state responded not the way that people wanted to be answered. It wasn't the protection that they wanted for the aquifer. It fell on the side of industry.
Kim wonders who the person is, Sherry.
Oh, we know. He's the mayor of the village of Pioneer, and he also owns 2 or 3 other companies. And the interesting thing is, he bought the property prior to, I mean, he knew AquaBounty was coming in. He bought the property, 80 acres, sold it to AquaBounty, made a ton of money. His company dropped the wells north of the village of Pioneer. He will be selling the water to AquaBounty. And yet we filed with the Ohio Ethics Commission, the Attorney General's office, and nothing has been done.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for keeping up the good fight there, because yeah, we all have to be concerned about this. And I liked in the video, water is medicine. And that's a different way of looking at it too, not just life sustaining, but medicine. I like that as well. Well, if there's anything else, otherwise we'll close there. I know there's a few comments you can read in the chat. Well, let me say that first of all, you can read more about Sherry's group and what's happened in Williams County, as well as other groups throughout Ohio and the Ohio Community Rights Network in Columbus and Youngstown and Toledo and so forth, in our book, Death by Democracy, that Susie, if Susie has the links, you can put it there in the chat. And or you can find it in our website there, OHCRN.org. Oh, Susie just put it in there, so you can find that there. So it's not very expensive, and you can read about the different community stories about what is called, the subtitle besides Death by Democracy, it says Protecting Water and Life, Frontline Stories from Ohioans Fighting Corporate and State Power. So that's what we need to do. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Just to give you an update, we're not going to have, this is our 5th community conversation. We're not going to have one in July and August in the summer, give people the summer off there, but we hope you'll come back and join us September 25th. We're going to have one on eco-villages and permaculture, and from a group of people in Cincinnati, and also have been working on an Ohio River Bill of Rights as well. And then in October, the 23rd, we're going to have a collective community conversations. We're going to invite everybody that has been part of these conversations that we've had so far, and the September one, to have a collective one to try to talk about the bigger picture of all of what we've done, and maybe some more ideas and strategies of things we can do. And we welcome your thoughts, as well as presenting some that we have. So again, thank you so much. And thanks, Sherry, and your group. And we hope to see you next time. So please look for us in September. And then you can find all the recordings of the past community conversations on our website. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you again.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you,
Yeah,
Sherry.
thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye all. Thanks.
Okay, I'll stop the recording.